Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. You know, there's an autumnal feel in the air. Can't kid yourself that summer's here any longer. At least the weather's good, because we've had horrible, wet, cold weather here at Longmeadow. And this time of year, when the weather's good, you need to take your opportunities, because it's a busy month, October. A lot to do to make sure that the garden is ready to cope with a bad winter if need be, and also so that it performs as well as possible next spring. Now, I shall be planting up these herb cuttings that I took earlier in the summer into the greenhouse to use that space for its maximum potential over the winter months. Carol is showing us how we can reinvigorate perennials and at the same time make new plants for free.
It's such fun dividing plants. What's great about it is not only can you make enough for yourself, you can make plenty so that you can swap and share.
And Rachel is at RHS Rosemore, looking at plants that can give our gardens another dimension at this time of year.
You could be forgiven for thinking that the visual impact is the most important thing, but I promise you the fragrance is the icing on the cake.
And I'll also be planting up lots of bulbs into the grass here. I grew tomatoes here in the summer and then they got blight. Now the soil hasn't been changed, but the blight won't affect anything other than members of the Solanaceae family, which essentially for gardeners, tomatoes or potatoes. And these are herbs, so they won't be affected by that at all. And these are cuttings that I took in the summer. And you can see, like this sage, they're coming on quite nicely. I potted them up and they've been sitting in pots for the last month or two, and they'll be quite happy to sit over winter in a cold frame. But if I put them in the greenhouse, it'll have the same effect as a cold frame, but also they'll grow a little and it will just give a little bit of a supply over winter. And then I can move them to the herb garden next May when I'm ready to plant out the tomatoes. And the fact that the soil hasn't been changed, is slightly exhausted, is good for Mediterranean herbs. They don't like lush, rich conditions. What they want is a little bit of hardship as long as the drainage is good. And I'll plant them out quite close. So this is a narrow leaf sage. And if I just take that out. So if I just pop this out on the edge, put that there like that. I've got some thyme there that I dug up from the ornamental vegetable garden that were having a tough time of it because they were getting too shaded. And thyme hates shade. So I'm going to plant those out too, and they will do much better. Greenhouses are good places to grow Mediterranean herbs. And there it goes. I've got parsley here too. This is giant parsley, loose-leafed. This, of course, has been grown from seed, not taken from a cutting, and this will grow quite well over winter and form quite a decent-sized plant. And I suppose really the point about this is that you're using the protection that you've got, and use the greenhouse, fill it up. Don't just see it as somewhere that is for summer plants. What the Mediterranean herbs really hate here at Longmeadow is a cold, wet winter. It's a real struggle for them to survive. And of course, if you don't have a greenhouse, you can do it on a windowsill, you can do it in a pot. Any protected environment that you can stop getting too wet, that's the worst thing, and then a little bit of heat, even if it's just a pane of glass. And with a little bit of winter sun, they will grow. And actually, at the same time, release that lovely, oily fragrance that makes Mediterranean herbs so special. Talking of fragrance, of course, in winter, there isn't much to be found, but it's surprising how many plants have a delicious scent at this time of year. And Rachel has been to RHS Rosemore in search of them.
At Rosemore, I'm following my nose to find the most perfumed plants for this time of year, for every size of garden. In the hot garden here at Rosemore, these late season perennials are very much the star of the show, and right in the heart of the thing, we've got this wonderful bergamot, the Monada prairie knot. It's absolutely smothered in bees at the moment, and given that we've had such an awful year for bees, it's been very wet. Well, this in itself is a reason to plant it. The monarda has very aromatic fragrance to the foliage, but when you see them in this setting, I mean, just surrounded by the heleniums, the rudbeckias, all those wonderful purples and oranges and golds, well, you could be forgiven for thinking that the visual impact is the most important thing. But I promise you, the fragrance is the icing on the cake. I always think of phlox as absolute cottage garden stalwarts, but of course they're lovely in any border setting. This is a gorgeous white form, paniculata, Mount Fuji, but they also come in sort of sugared almond shades of mauve and pale blues. They're very fragrant, and that fragrance is quite powdery. It's quite fresh and clean as well. And it's obviously very attractive to all sorts of beneficial insects, including butterflies, bees, and above all moths, who have a long proboscis, and that gets down into the tubular part of the flower. But in this setting, surrounded by dazzling white flowers and silvery foliage, well, they positively sparkle. One of the most surprising fragrances you'll find wafting around in autumn comes from the Katsura tree. It's native to China and Japan, where in the wild it can grow up to 200 feet tall with a massive girth of 80 foot, so you'll need a big garden to accommodate it. But its sweet scent, which comes from its delicate leaves, can fill an entire garden. Those leaves, which are sort of heart-shaped, as they turn to these lovely colours of ochre and gold, well, the sugars within them break down, and then you get this fragrance, and it's like toffee apples just wafting across the garden almost to get you. It's fantastic and redolent of everything about autumn. Bonfire nights, those lovely crisp mornings. This really is a favourite fragrance at this time of year. There's room in most gardens for shrubby perennials, and many have outstanding late summer scent too. The pineapple sage, Salvia elegans, is renowned for its flowers, but its foliage has the most intense and delicious fragrance. I think it's beautiful as a foliage plant, and these leaves, which are so good to look at, they're also intensely, sweetly scented of pineapples. Plants that produce aromatic foliage, they usually do so as a deterrent to insects or to grazing animals, as a way of saying, keep off and don't eat me. But I have to say, in a garden situation, spectacular. The Victorians knew a thing or two about plants, and they were big fans of heliotropes, which they use very often in their bedding schemes. This one is called Heliotropium arborescens Chatsworth, and it's a particularly good form with really intense dark purple flowers and a good, lovely colour to the foliage and stems as well. It's very sweet, perhaps even slightly cloying, and reminds me of cherry pie. But I think here at the front of the border, it's absolutely stunning. If you want the added dimension of late summer scent in the garden, these are plants both great and small to fill your senses throughout autumn.
I guess that most gardeners think of yew as this monumental hedging material that will create a solid green backdrop to a border or along the boundary of a garden. But it can make a really good low hedge, and I'm thinking about using it to replace box if I lose all my box to box blight. And now is the perfect time of year to both plant yew and also to take cuttings. Now, when you're looking for cut material for yews, you want leaders. And you can see here is a good example. Here we have a nice, strong leader. That's good 12 inches of growth this year, and that will make a healthy plant. There's another one there. But all the way up the stem, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 side shoots. Now, those side shoots will provide cut material, but it will never make a good upright plant. These are semi-ripe cuttings, which means that it's this year's growth, but it's starting to harden off. It hasn't yet got brown and woody, but it's not floppy. When you bend it, it returns to its shape. If you haven't got an unclipped yew hedge or access to one, sometimes it's worth just buying one healthy plant just for cutting material. Do as we always do with cuttings, is pop it into a polythene bag so it doesn't lose too much moisture, although evergreens do lose their moisture much more slowly than deciduous plants. Now, if you're taking any cuttings at all, it's worth preparing a compost with extra perlite or grit in it. And this will make a freer root run, so these delicate little roots have less obstruction, and also the roots can rot and the base of the plant can rot before it roots if it sits in cold, wet water. And then there are two ways of taking cuttings from you. The first is conventional. You've got a good shoot there. Strip off the bottom half of the leaves, cut that off, slightly damage it because that will stimulate growth, and then slide it in against the edge of the pot. If that roots, it'll provide a nice, vigorous, upright plant. However, what you can do with you is I can divide it up into stem cuttings. So if I cut there and there, I've got 3 lengths. I can strip the bottom off and I can put these in, and these will each root and make a cutting that's rather bushier. This is the perfect time of year to take any evergreen cutting. Although you don't always propagate plants to make new ones, sometimes you have to do it for the health of the plant. And Carol is answering a question this week on how best to divide fibrous rooted plants.
We get lots of emails from all over Europe, and of course we share a lot of the same gardening problems. We've had one from Judith Siegmann in Germany, who's wondering what on earth she can do to get her agapanthus to flower. She says, rather sadly, "I remember them flowering each and every year around my birthday. Now there's just an odd flower. I'm at my wit's end to know what to do. I really miss those masses of blue flowers that I remember so fondly." Well, you've also sent us some photos, Judy, and your agapanthus actually look really, really healthy. Masses of green leaves, but as you say, not a flower in sight. Perhaps the answer is to try dividing some of these plants to get them to produce those lovely blue flowers you remember so well. Well, as you can see, I'm lucky enough to have this wonderful big pot of agapanthus. Well, last year I divided one of my plants that had stopped flowering and was pot-bound. And I made 4 big chunks, and 3 of them have actually flowered this time. So it's definitely worth a try. Now, the other little point you mentioned is that you keep your plants in a cellar over winter. Now, because the Pricox group are evergreen, I think really being deprived of light for so long is also going to work against their flowering. So if you possibly can, still giving them the frost protection they need, give them more light too. This time of the year is the ideal time to divide plants with big fleshy roots, like agapanthus. Hemerocallis are closely related, and they too can be divided now. There are 2 times of year when division is a good idea. One's the autumn and one's the spring. I wouldn't dream of dividing these beautiful rudbeckias and these asters, the Michaelmas daisies, because they're just coming into their own. It'd be cruel. I divide them in the spring, but there are several plants here, and there are 3 clumps of one daylily, which really do need my attention. It's not just a question of making more plants and doing you a favour. It's almost like the plants themselves tell you when they want to be divided. When their performance, their flowering and perhaps their foliage is just not what it once was, it's time to step in, dig it up and make it into lots of new plants and just discard those old woody centres. So you want to get the first fork right into the middle of the clump. You need a good aim, and then with the second fork really back to back. The 2 should be touching, and you can hear that sort of rending noise, and it seems so terribly cruel, but you're just being cruel to be kind. All this tatty foliage, you can pull it off, but I think then it's a good idea to just chop it. And those roots are a bit long too. You never ever want to fold roots when you're replanting them, so I'll give them a quick haircut. So I'm going to dig a hole nice and deep. These daylilies will overwinter in my veggie bed before I plant them out in the spring. In the shady part of the garden, I want to make some more of one of my favourite woodland plants. This is an epimedium. This one's called Epimedium versicolor. I always want more of it, and now is the time to divide it. Now you can see here what I'm after is each piece has got to have one or two at least of these fat little pink buds, because those are what's going to make next year's flowers and new leaves. By rinsing the roots you can see the buds more clearly before putting the plants in pots. In the spring, if they've got a really well-developed root system, you can plant them out. If not, just hang on for a bit and plant them later. Well, this time of year, garden centres are full of plants and a lot of them are going cheap. It's a great time to be planting new stuff out, but it's an even better time to see if you can't get a few good divisions from each plant that you buy. Some things are still in full flower, like this gorgeous crimson lobelia. But in this case, it's already making rosettes at the bottom. If I use these flower stems to just push the whole thing apart. Oh, look at that. Two nice big chunks first of all, and then I can pull these other pieces off too. It's such fun dividing plants. What's great about it is not only can you make enough for yourself, you can make plenty so that you can swap and share. And of course, in the process, you're reinvigorating all those plants.
We've all seen daffodils growing in grass where you get these incredible blades of yellow and orange, almost looking like a huge flower border for a few weeks in March and April. And that's lovely. However, you can grow daffodils so that they grow in the grass like wildflowers. And there is one native, or at least naturalized daffodil called Narcissus pseudonarcissus, that actually grows in this part of the world on the edge of woods, and you see these delicate flowers leaking out into the fields. And they like damp, fairly woodlandy conditions, and an orchard is absolutely ideal. But they are slow to develop. So this is something that you do for the long term. They're not going to give you a big hit. But if I plant them now, which is exactly the right time, there's a chance that about half of them will flower next year, and then more and more will flower, and then they'll spread by seed. There is a technique to making them look natural. And I've tried every way, and I can guarantee that the only way to do it is just take a handful of bulbs and then cast them to the winds. And plant them exactly where they land. And if they land in clumps and groups, it doesn't matter, because that's how they grow in the wild. Now, having done that, you then need the right tool for the job. With these tiny bulbs, if the ground is moist enough, a trowel will do the job. But remember, you want to plant twice their own depth. So that's quite deep. With a bigger bulb, it's worth investing in a stand-up bulb planter. Helps your back, and you just push down on it like that, take out a hole, and what it does is create a core. And it really, really saves a lot of time and effort. So I highly recommend these. And with daffodils, you do want to get on with this because they start growing now. And the more time they have to grow in the ground, the more likely they are to produce a flower. So you just pop that in and pop that over the top. It's a good idea if you're planting a lot of bulbs in grass to put a hose onto the area for an hour or two. You'll find the whole process is a lot easier. And also, after you've planted, if it's dry, water them well. They need moisture in autumn in order to produce the best flowers in spring. This is Narcissus poeticus. It comes from subalpine meadows down as far south as Greece and on the Mediterranean, but essentially this is damp, hilly ground, and it's hardy. So this will grow anywhere in Britain, and as long as it's reasonably damp and not too dry, it'll thrive. And what it gives you is that halfway house between the ephemeral quality of Pseudonarcissus and the slightly overpowering muscularity of some of the daffodil hybrids. And also, if you look at it, it's a great big bulb. You can pretty much guarantee that this will flower next year, so you're getting an immediate return and display. And I'm going to put some around these individual trees in what will be a loose group, and hopefully they will then mingle and merge with the Pseudonarcissus as they in time spread. Now obviously I want these bulbs to look as natural as possible, but however hard you try, it never quite looks the same in a garden as it does in the wild. And perhaps the most incredible display of natural bulbs in the whole of Britain are the fritillaries at Cricklade Watermeadows.
Longmeadow is just such a stunning place. One of those places you just have to see before you die, I think. Longmeadow holds 80% of the UK's population of fritillary, Fritillaria meleagris, which are known locally as snake's head fritillaries. Snake's head refers to the way they snake their way out of the grasses with this beautiful checkered pattern on them, almost with a viper-like face. Here in front of me we've got a lovely display of fritillaries in their different stages. So if we look at this one here, is not going to flower this year. It probably didn't build up a big enough corm last year, but the plants can actually survive. The corm's 25 to 30 years. Just behind it, one that's just snaked up out of the ground, and there we can see that it's going to be a purple flower by the brown on the stalk. This one, in flower beautifully, we can see the anthers inside and where all the bumblebees are going to go in and collect their pollen and do their work. Just a little bit further over, a lovely example of a white fritillary, but you can see green stem, that shows that it's going to be that white even when it's in bud. But look at these, where they have that viper-like face and that beautiful snake's head patterning. Longmeadow is 110 acres, but on all sides bounded by a river, so the River Churn and the River Thames. We don't really know how long fritillaries have been in Longmeadow. We certainly know that they were noted as being in the wild from 1736. They were picked by their armfuls at one time, but no picking now. This is a standing hay crop. It's grown until the end of June. So there's no interference for fritillaries. They're allowed to set their seed. The seed falls to the ground well before the hay is taken. Then the cattle come in and graze the land nice and short. The fritillaries at that point are underground, growing their next year's corm. Then we may get some flooding, which brings on the fertility for all of the flowers here, including the fritillaries. In spring again, up they come, and there's no cattle on here. So everything here is going to be for success of fritillaries in flower. People come, and especially on my guided walks, will ask me how they can grow fritillaries in their gardens. The conditions that they grow best in are moist conditions, but not on the edge of a pond. They're not marginal plants. Some people think because it floods here they need to be in water. That's not the case. So yes, they like their moisture, but don't put them in too damp an area. If you've got a deciduous tree, an apple tree or something in your lawn, plant them around that. They'll get the early light levels, so they'll come up through the grasses, let them self-seed, and hopefully you will have lots more fritillaries in time to come. Just remember where they are so you don't give that bit of lawn an early cut. I think a lot of gardens in Cricklade have their own little patch of fritillaries. They are very much woven into the fabric of the community here. We just love the time when the fritillaries, when the meadow gets that purple haze on it and you know the fritillaries are out.
I think those meadows are so beautiful, and I'd really like to go and see them next spring. Now, it'd be nice to have a 100-acre water meadow filled with fritillaries, but most of us don't have that opportunity. If you've got a patch of damp, grassy ground, then you can plant the bulbs straight in. But they also grow very well and look great in a spring border. But when you look at the border at this time of year, there's no space to plant them. And even if there is a patch, you're not certain that it will look right come next March and April. So what I like to do is to plant the bulbs in pots, let them grow on, and then plant out the young plants as the foliage appears next spring. And you just need a normal compost. You don't need any extra drainage. Put a little bit in the bottom of the pot, and then put 1 or 2 of the bulbs about 4 times its own depth. They need to be planted quite deep. And you don't need to keep the pot in any way protected. It's adapted to cold, wet weather, and then you can deal with them in spring. Now, even if you don't want to plant fritillaries, here are some things you can get on with this weekend. If you've got a decent apple crop this year, and not everybody has, then it's worth taking trouble to store them. And in general, any apple that ripens from mid-October onwards will store better than early ripeners. And the secret is to collect them very carefully, handle them gently, and then store them on racks so they're ventilated and in the cool and dark. Make sure that no one fruit is touching another, and check them regularly to remove any that are damaged. It'll soon be time to start collecting leaves, and I regard leaf mould as important as compost. So to make room for this year's leaves, it's a good idea to bag up last year's leaf mould. It can then be stored anywhere you like, where it will quietly go on improving, or else be sieved ready for use as potting compost straight away. Pumpkins are not going to get any bigger from that one. However, there is a chance for them to ripen if we get some sunshine. So remove all foliage around the fruits so that they're exposed to whatever sun we get. And the more they ripen, the thicker their skins will be. And the thicker their skins, the better they keep. Well, this tray of fritillaries can just go here, where they won't get bashed, but they need no attention at all. And then when they're growing, I'll plant them out next spring. That's it for this week. I'll be back here at Longmeadow, same time next Friday, so join me then. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to rather a wet Longmeadow. It's been one of those days where the rain sweeps in, gives you a really good drenching. You go and try and get dry, and then it clears up. So you go back out, and then it starts again. But I'll be persevering, because I shall be pruning a climbing rose that's got into a bit of a tangle.
Carol shows us how easy it is to propagate from root cuttings.
In my garden here, I grow lots and lots of wood anemones. I just love them, and I want to make loads more of these beautiful flowers.
Jo goes in search of apple trees that will suit any size of garden.
Here at West Dean, they're growing some fruit trees in some pretty novel ways and in a fashion that would suit the smallest of gardens.
And I shall be planting apples for small spaces too, if the rain holds off. This is a climbing rose called Madame Gregoire Steichler. It's lovely. It's got beautiful, big pink flowers that start in May, It goes on flowering right through into autumn, sometimes into October. And this year, it sort of petered out in September, and it's made lots and lots of lush, strong growth. And the problem with any climber is if you let that strong growth become a tangle, it's really difficult to untangle. So it's worth keeping on top of it. You can see how this differs from a rambler in the way that you have really quite strong, robust growth growing from a permanent framework. And the idea is to prune back to that framework every year. Now, the way that a climbing rose works is that the flowers are produced off lateral growth. So you have a stem, if you can see going along here, trained along this wire that I tied in last year. And that, and all these behind me are laterals that either have done or would do produce flowers. You can see the hips developing from the flowers. So all those need pruning back to 1 or 2 leaves. It's not critical. So that's the first thing to do, because then you can see the framework easier. So if I start at this end and I just train like that, even these big ones I'm going to take right back. You can do this at any stage in the winter, but I like to do it in autumn, because if you get bad weather in winter, all this growth swings around and it can damage the plant, it can damage the roots, and if there are people walking about, they're pretty nasty things to be flapping about. So it's a good idea to get this done before the weather gets too bad. This is the point where you do need to have a look at the existing framework and see if you're happy with it, because sometimes these older growths are getting woody and not producing many side shoots, and now is the time to remove them and replace them. Actually, in this case, I don't want to remove any, but if you do, use a saw or a big pair of loppers and cut them right at the base and train another shoot, a fresh young one, preferably from the base too, to replace it. In principle, when you're pruning anything, you cut to something. And in this case, it's just above a leaf. So if you just cut above there, you'll do no harm at all. But don't agonize over it. This one here, if I put that there, that can train sideways, which is good. You want to encourage as much lateral, horizontal growth as possible, because if a stem is growing horizontally, you'll get more side shoots, and it's side shoots that produce the flowers. So all your training should be geared towards spreading it out sideways. I like to use soft twine when tying anything in, because it doesn't do any damage to the plant. Whatever you do, don't use wire, because all that will do is cut through the tender growing stems. And if you just hold in your head that you're trying to create this neat lattice work across whatever surface it is it's covering that is as two-dimensional as possible. You don't really want anything coming out more than, say, 4 or 5 inches. That I will tie in there, and this can go here. Actually, no, tie the bottom one first. Actually, that's another tip. Always do your tying from the bottom, because as you're bending the stems, you want them to be fixed lower down, because otherwise there's a risk of them slightly kinking and then they can break. So let's take this back, tie it right down here. That's good. That's fine. A couple more bits to be tied in, but I've got a decent framework which is set up for next spring, and then we'll get the laterals which will bear the flowers. Now, of course, I've got to tidy up, and that takes as long as doing the job. But while I'm doing that, Carol is dividing and taking root cuttings from anemones.
Wood anemones are one of our most magical wildflowers. You walk through the woods on a cold, dark day in April. The whole place is dreary, but walk again on the next day when the sun shines and the whole woodland floor is a sparkle with their beautiful flowers. In my garden here, I grow lots and lots of wood anemones. I just love them, and I want to try and emulate the kind of feeling that you get as you walk through those wild woods. And I want to make loads more of these beautiful flowers all across the shady part of my garden. In the spring, this whole area glistens with the beautiful white flowers of wood anemones. But at the moment, they're completely dormant. They've gone to sleep. But I know they're in here, and I'm determined to find them. It's a strange thing, isn't it? You don't think about roots. And yet, without them, these trees and all this beautiful stuff here just wouldn't be. And I suppose you think, well, propagating from roots. You used to do it from seeds and from cuttings, but there are a lot of plants that you can make more of just from their roots. I think I'm in luck. That's a typical example. You've got these lovely sort of mahogany-coloured little rhizomes there, and at the end of them, these embryonic buds. And all I'm going to do is snap them up in pieces. Each of them has some tiny fibrous roots, and they'll make a new clump by the spring. Well, I've chosen this lovely little shady corner, just spacing them out so they're growing along the surface. If you haven't got wood anemones already in your own garden, you can easily get them from a specialist bulb merchant or some garden centres too. The rhizomes will look exactly the same, and you just repeat the process. But there's another anemone that's at the height of its floral glory right now, and you propagate that too from its roots. I absolutely love this Japanese anemone, and a lot of people would say, what do you want more of that for? Because it is true, once you've got these established, they very often take over a whole patch. But why not? I mean, this time of year, you really do need wonderful colour. Well, if I root around in this soil here, I know I'm going to come across some of these roots. There we go. All along the root, there are these little teeny nodules which are just waiting to be new shoots. But instead of just putting them into the garden, by far the best way is to use something like a module tray. You can do them into little seed trays as well, but this way you know that once they've taken root in here and you move them on, there's going to be no root disturbance at all. The really important point is that you make sure that they lie horizontally across the compost. And all you're doing with this propagation technique is exploiting what the plant does in nature. Always the best policy. There are some plants whose roots don't grow outwards, they grow downwards with a vengeance. They have great big tap roots. But you can propagate from a lot of those as well. And this is a prime example. It's a verbascum. It's for Bascom Cotswold Queen. It's got these gorgeous terracotta flowers. I always want more. So what I want to do is, with a sharp knife, go in right to the centre of the plant, as close to the crown as I can, and just cut it across. With horizontal root cuttings, it doesn't matter which way up they go because they're just going across. But with these kind of cuttings, with big taproot vertical cuttings, it's vital that you get the right end up. So always the top of your cutting is the end that was closest to the crown of your plant. People get terribly put off by root cuttings. They worry about it, but it's simple and straightforward. Also, I think at this time of year, you tend to think you've finished with propagating. You know, you've sown your seeds and you've taken your other cuttings, but this is the perfect time from now and right through the winter to take root cuttings.
This is the ideal time of year to plant out biennials that will flower next spring. And I've got a load of wallflowers here that I've raised from seed. Now, you can buy wallflowers in garden centres and shops at this time of year, and traditionally they were sold in hardware stores, wrapped up in newspaper. But if you grow them from seed, they cost practically nothing. A couple of packets of seed here, I've got about 300 plants. That makes it about 2p a plant. Now, this is a variety called Blood Red. Fantastic, rich, ruby red flowers. And what I'm looking for is plants that have got a nice root system and to keep a bit of soil on them. See, there you are. That's such a good plant. I'm very pleased with that. It's exactly what you want to look for when you're buying a wallflower at this time of year. And one of the beauties of wallflowers is they have a huge colour range, from almost white to almost dark purple. The weather's a bit miserable, and it's been trying to rain for the last few hours, but that is really good for transplanting anything. Wet air, slightly damp soil, perfect, because the plant is full of moisture and it minimises the damage of transplanting. I'm going to be planting them in this bed here, in fact these 4 beds, and underplanting them with tulips. Now, tulips don't need to go in for another few weeks, best to leave those till November. Take your plant, keeping as much soil as possible on the roots, and pop them in, not too deep, same height that they were, and then firm that in. So that's nice, and it will stand up on its own accord. And as for spacing, I put that about a foot away from the hedge. Wallflowers do best in full sun, so not too much shade. This is actually a marginal position. I've grown them here often, and they do fine. And I like them here because the scent is so good close to the house. But to get the very best from them, give them a sunny spot. If you've got slightly acidic soil, in other words, if you've got rhododendrons or azaleas or heathers in your garden, it's a good idea to lime it first. You can buy lime easily from a garden centre and spread it about a week before you plant it out. And you don't need to add any compost or goodness at all. All you'll get if you do that is a bigger plant with more foliage, but you won't get any more flowers. Joe has been along to West Dean Gardens near Chichester in West Sussex to see not only lots of different types of apple, but lots of different ways of growing them.
When we imagine a traditional orchard, we think of neat rows of fruit trees with boughs laden with blushing apples and pears. But what if we want to grow a decent crop of fruit at home and space is limited? Well, here at West Dean in the Victorian Wall Garden, they grow some fruit trees in some pretty novel ways and in a fashion that would suit the smallest of gardens. For the last 21 years, Jim Buckland and his wife Sarah Wayne have been turning this once derelict Victorian wall garden back to its 19th century glory. Jim was recently awarded the RHS Associate Medal of Honour for distinguished services to horticulture, and because to date he has made West Dean as beautiful and abundant as its heyday, if not more so. The redevelopment is impressive, and Jim also has some pretty bold ideas when it comes to growing fruit. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Joe.
These are very unusual shapes. Are they all Victorian originally, these designs?
Yeah, evolved during the 19th century, yeah.
Yeah, they're really quite funky shapes. I love them, but it's not just about how they look. They also produce a lot of fruit, don't they, for the size of plants?
Indeed. Well, most woody plants have growth hormones in them. And most woody plants, most trees, if you think of most trees, they have apical dominance, so that the tree wants to form a single leader going up and then branch out. By taking out the central leader, you slow down the flow of those hormones to the rest of the tree, and it encourages branching lower down. Yeah. So it encourages flowering, therefore it encourages fruiting.
Not all apple trees will respond so well, will they?
You need spur producers, so spurs being those very short little fruiting branches that most apples and all pears produce. And if you look in a catalogue, it will always tell you whether they're a spur bearer. Probably 90% of apples are spur bearers.
Yeah.
I think the reason I love doing it is because, well, partly because I love pruning things, and I think pruning is one of the most creative things you can do in gardening, but also it's actually very attractive. And you can imagine this in full flower and then in full fruit. You know, it's absolutely joy to look at.
A Victorian pioneering fruit grower was French professor of agriculture Louis Lorette. He devised wacky ways of growing apples and pears, mainly as an experiment for intensive commercial fruit production. Lorette found that by contorting branches and planting the trees close together, he could produce heavier crops that would be easier to pick. But how do you get apples and pears to perform these puzzling poses?
So let's say this has got roots, we've planted it. You do something quite brutal, you just chop all this lovely growth off the top.
Take that really hard back.
What we hope is we get 3 good breaks. So you're taking one branch out.
One this way,
one this
that
way, and one up.
One up.
Centre. Next year, these 2 branches have grown out. End of the season, I've cut back to there, and off we go again. So
is that pretty much 1 year, 2 years, every year? You're getting something different?
I mean, that's one of the points about this is you've got to be reasonably patient. It takes anything up to 7 years to make some of these shapes.
Cordons are both an extremely attractive and efficient way of getting fruit into a small space. The trees are grown at this angle, the growing tips are taken out, and they fruit all the way down the trunks there. But what's interesting is that here we've got 12 metres of walling and 15 different plants, so you can get really good variety into your garden. So if you push for space, but you still want good choice of varieties, cordons could be the answer. The fruit here at West Dean is grown in all kinds of imaginative ways that not only produce good crops, but introduce an effective design element into any garden. These pyramids and goblets are trained onto a simple framework that not only introduce a sense of fun into the garden, but a strong focal point too. Now, it doesn't matter how small your garden is. I think it's important to get height into it through planting and sometimes structures too. Now, you don't need a walkway quite as long as this. Just a couple of fruit trees bent over a simple structure will do the job. It'll create a vista, it'll draw the eye, but more importantly, it'll make you want to walk through it.
I haven't been to West Dean for ages, but I remember when I went there thinking how amazing all the trained fruit was, and I completely agree that pruning is the most creative thing you can do in a garden. But it is a bit daunting for a lot of us. And if you haven't got much space and you think it's going to take a long time, there is a very easy option, which is particularly good for lining a path, and those are step-over apples. Now, these only grow to about 1 or 2 feet high, and then they stretch out along the path. So they're very slim, very low. Quite frankly, if you can grow anything along the border of a path, you can grow these fruit trees. Now, the planting of them is like any tree or shrub. Make a hole, but don't make it too deep. Now, take it out the pot like that, and you can see that's got a nice root system. Very nice indeed. But first I'm going to put a little bit of mycorrhizae in. The mycorrhizae, of course, are fungi, and by adding a little bit of mycorrhizae to the soil and the roots, and it's important that the roots make a direct connection to it, you get a much better uptake of nutrients. It acts as a conduit between the soil and the roots, so therefore the plant grows away all the quicker. Now pop it in so that the top of the pot is slightly above soil level. You don't want it sitting down below. Actually, that is perfect. All apple trees are grafted onto a rootstock. There's the grafting point. That determines the size and vigour of the tree, and what's above determines the variety of the fruit. And stepovers are grown on a dwarf rootstock. Now, this apple is called Discovery. And Discovery is an early apple, should fruit in mid-August to mid-September. Now, the next stage is to create a supportive framework for it, because we want these branches here to grow as long as possible. Now, obviously, if you buy them already shaped, as these are, it's easy. But this does cost about 30 quid. And you can go about it in a different way with a much cheaper version, but it does mean training them yourselves. If you buy a maiden, that's simply an expression for a plant that's got no branches, you can train your own. Now, there are 2 ways to do this. Jim showed how that you can cut it off and encourage shoots to grow sideways. But I'm going to show you another method, which is actually easier. Now, the first thing to do is to plant it exactly like the others. Now that's planted upright, growing to the sky. So before I do any kind of training, I need to get the support in, just like the other ones. Now, this apple is Egremont russet, a lovely nutty apple, quite a thick leathery skin, which ripens about now, about the middle to end of October. Now, to get the best from this, tie it at the base. So what you do is just slowly train that down, and then you tie a string to the top and bend it until it's comfortable. Obviously, you don't want to snap it. Don't tie it at the very tip, but there, because you actually want the tip to bend upwards. Because if a plant is bending down, it grows much more slowly than if it's growing up. The time to do this is not now, but next spring. It'll take about 2 or 3 years to get it down to the horizontal, but it will grow, and it will train across to here, and we'll tie it in, and that's a really easy way of training it. Now, you may not be planting apples this weekend, although it's a jolly good time to do it, but here are some other things you can get on with. Hellebores won't start flowering till after the new year, but it's a good idea to check through them now, looking for signs of hellebore blight. This will show itself as chocolate-coloured markings on the leaves. If you see it, remove the foliage and the stem right down to the ground.
and you'll do no harm at all by taking all the foliage off if you've any doubts. If you've got a wood-burning stove or an open fire that only burns wood, the resulting ash is a really good source of potash for the garden. Now, it's best to apply this in spring, so either store it in bags or else sprinkle it onto the compost heap, and then when you put the compost down, the potash will be there. Chicory is a fantastic winter vegetable and very hardy, but it doesn't like wet weather and it needs good ventilation. So keep pulling off old, tough leaves, which you're not going to eat, to allow the air to get to the young, tender growth, which is so delicious.
Well, that's it for this week. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, we've had a few sharp frosts here at Longmeadow, and I think it's time to bring pumpkins in. You want to leave them out so they get as much of the autumn sunshine as possible, and that ripens them, but they don't like it too cold. So to make sure that they store well, I think the time is to get them out of the cold. You can see there's one here that's had a bad time of it. But I've got a couple here that are good. Anyway, it'll soon be Halloween, so the timing is right.
Now, this week, Joe is visiting a garden in central London that shows how the combination of good design and clever lighting can maximise all the potential of even the smallest space.
Every square inch has been used imaginatively to bring the indoors outside.
Carol is in Pembrokeshire, looking at willows. Now, these look wonderful in the wild, but also there are many variations that can look spectacular in any garden.
The willow family is huge, it's enormous, there are hundreds of species.
And I shall be lifting the tender plants that gave me such a good display in containers over summer and replacing them with winter flowering plants and bulbs for next spring. This is my main pumpkin patch. Pumpkins are delicious. They store really well, they taste good, and they're fantastic winter food. So I want to make the most of what I've got. Now, when you're harvesting them, it is important to cut them, not yank them, and also to keep a good piece of stem. Now, that really matters because they won't store nearly so well if you cut the stem off. That's where the rot gets in. So when you're cutting them off, make sure you've got a nice length of stem like that. And the other point is, even though they've got quite a hard skin, look after them. Treat them carefully, because they can get bruised, and if they bruise, they won't store. Now, it's not a particularly good harvest, but there's plenty of potentially delicious food there. Pumpkin soup, pumpkin pie, my favourite, just roast pumpkin. Cut them into segments or pieces, stick them in the oven with a scattering of thyme and a bit of oil. Absolutely delicious. Now, a few weeks ago, I cut all the leaves off, and I got an email in response to that, which shows that I may have been missing a trick all these years, because Galia Arab wrote to me and said, I'm from Zimbabwe, and we cook the foliage and eat it as you do spinach. And they are scrummy and have tons of iron. So perhaps next year, even if there are no fruit, maybe it's worth growing pumpkins just for the foliage. Now, the thing to do is just find a sunny spot so they can have a nice sunbathe. And the whole point of laying them out is to get the skins to harden as much as possible. Because the harder the skin, the longer they'll last. And even some of the thinner skinned ones
should last for at least 3 months. If we get hard frosts later in the week, these will have to come in. But even a couple of days will do good. There we are. Let's hope we get some sunshine. Now, I planted these pots up last May, and they're filled with tender plants. You've got cannas, dahlias, 2 different types of cosmos, and nasturtiums. Now, these all will be killed by temperatures below about -5. So I think it's time to move on, not least because I want to use the pots. I want winter colour and colour for next spring. I need to start planting those up now. However, you can leave dahlias in until the tops are completely blackened. That won't kill them. Now with dahlias, just cut them back so that they're manageable. Now dahlias have tubers, and it's the tubers that have developed this year that will feed next year's flowers. So I'm going to rootle around to try and take these out with as least damage as possible. There we go. Can you see here the potato-like tubers? And that can go into there. Now the cosmos, there we go. Now cannas have got fleshy roots. I want to bring up as much root as possible because that is storing next year's food. Come on, you. Come on, there we go. And it is the roots that we're going to preserve over winter. These are unimportant and can be cut back to make life easier. I'll be storing these tender plants later on, but I'm going to replant these pots first. I used a rich compost in the summer, but it'll be totally exhausted now and must be removed and replaced before I can begin replanting. First thing I like to do if I'm planting bulbs is get large plants in, and then I can work around them. And the largest plants here are the wallflowers. In fact, the same ones as I planted last week, blood red. And I'm going to put them right at the edge so there's an element of spillage. These, of course, are grown from seed. Right, and I'll put one in the middle. Now, around those, I'm going to put the tulips, and I've got 2 types. The first is an old favourite called flaming parrot. Now, parrot tulips have these wonderful raggedy edges. It's like this fireburst of colour. Absolutely fabulous tulip. Now, I'm going to put these in nice and deep. And the other one is a new tulip on me. This is Aladdin. This is always upright and stately and elegant. And these, of course, will grow up through the planting that I'm putting on top of it. I've got here pansies and violas, and you can see the difference. Winter flowering pansies, big flowers, floppy petals, and the violas, which you could say are more modest, more muted, less powerful, but it's not true, actually. I prefer them. You get more flowers, they really just keep coming back and back, and they're tougher, they're hardier, they're practically impossible to stop them flowering in any weather. And we'll put these fairly close to the edge. There's no way that this is pretending to be subtle, sophisticated planting. There's a time and a place for that, but here it isn't. The roots need a chance to establish in the pot, and for the roots to grow at their very best, they don't need to support flowers, which is the most demanding thing they can do. So by taking this crop of flowers off, you're giving the roots a chance to grow really strongly and well. And you'll get new flowers within a week or 2, and many, many more flowers over a longer period as a result. So this is a truly important thing to do. If you have a large garden, then even big pots blend into the picture. And this is particularly true if it's a country garden. But if you have a small, urban back garden, then you do need to pay attention to every detail. And Joe has been to visit a garden in central London, which is a superb example of that.
A small shady garden can be challenging to design. But one effective idea is to turn it into an outdoor living area. In this garden in Notting Hill, every square inch has been used imaginatively to bring the indoors outside. This private urban garden is just 8 metres by 10, and it inventively exploits every design rule to get the most out of the space, as well as providing a backdrop to be enjoyed both day and night. It is designed around 3 distinct living spaces, linked by limestone paving, water and planting. Now, in a small urban garden like this, every plant has to really earn its keep. And this is a fantastic choice of a small tree, breaking up the eye level in the middle of the garden here, Amelanchier lamarckii. I've got one in my own garden, and I've got a multi-stem version too, lovely sculptural form all the way through the winter. But then it's got very early white spring flowers, followed by bronzy foliage, and then you get fruit on it, which the birds love later in the year, and then a week or so it'll be covered in flamey orangey red foliage. Lots of interest all through the year. A fantastic choice. You can stay there for many years to come. In a small garden, it's a good idea to make the boundaries a real feature. In this space, the linear fencing makes the garden feel bigger and provides an attractive backdrop for the planting. They've gone for a really nice, slick look, using slatted cedar timbers laid horizontally all the way around, and because the boundaries all have the same finish, it creates a lovely, harmonious, cohesive look to the space. Now, you don't have to splash out loads of cash. You can get softwood timber, and you can think about staining it, but this cedar, well, it's classy and it'll last a lifetime. To find out how this outdoor room was created, I caught up with the garden's designer, Charlotte Rowe. This can only be described as a very, very cool garden, really.
It's very cool.
Yeah, wouldn't mind himself, really.
No, not me.
And you're blurring the indoors and the outdoors together. But how have you done that?
We were able to work really closely with the architect and the interior designers and the client on this. So, for example, we wanted a pale stone out here. We used limestone a lot, and we were able to make sure that the same stone is used inside and out. So it's completely seamless right way through the ground floor. Then the colour palette that was used inside, which was a soft browny colour, we were able to bring that out here, using that, for example, in the pots down there, in the furniture here, but also we were wanting to really reflect this wonderful capsule, the use of the materials on that, the copper and the timber, and that was very much reflected out in the garden as well.
The glass balustrade is so effective because if you'd had something blocking the eye from indoors to outdoors, it would ruin the whole effect.
Absolutely. When you come out, you just have this through view to the garden, and it's just nothing stopping the view at all. It's fantastic. Glass is what we always prefer to do because it just looks amazing, and it isn't difficult to maintain either, and it just gives it a completely seamless look. We like to divide the garden up in urban gardens because it then makes the space look bigger. So we put the water feature here, and then we're able to make a journey that goes through the garden, intersects through the Amelanchier lamarckii to the sitting area at the end and to the dining area. You don't make the space look bigger by having narrow beds at the side and a patch of lawn in the middle. You do it by actually being more inventive with the space and breaking it up a little bit and creating a journey.
This outdoor room maximises every inch of space, but as day falls to night, garden lighting transforms it into a magical setting. Now, it's really tempting to put big, bright lights all over the garden, but it's not good for wildlife, and it's also not good for the look of the garden too. What we're really looking for is something that's pretty low-key, creating ambient light that just drifts nicely through the whole space. Level changes and steps should be lit for practical reasons. Use energy-efficient LEDs to gently sweep light across the paving surface. Downlighters are great for emphasising design details. And uplighters are really good for raking across textures of tree trunks and walls, but remember to subdue the light levels to keep things really moody. And water lights enhance the depth of this contemporary pond, creating a lovely shimmering light that indirectly illuminates the garden. Using garden lighting takes the idea of an outdoor room to even greater heights, one that you can enjoy both day and night.
I think the really important thing, if you've got a tiny garden, is to make the places that you sit in really attractive, so you want to go out in there. Anyway, now I must deal with these plants and get them properly stored. Now, the three basic plants here, Cosmos atrosanguineus, dahlia and the canna, all have slightly different ways of seeing them through the winter. If we take the chocolate cosmos first, it's still in pretty good nick. There are buds on there, there are flowers that won't go on growing, so I'm going to put this into an individual pot so I can keep it flowering outside until the risk of frost is really there. I want to make the most of it. Doesn't have to be cut back necessarily. You're not looking to store its roots in particular, but can be kept as an entire plant. And then when it's finished flowering, you just cut it back a bit and pop the whole pot into a frost-free place, which cold frame will do the job ideally. So that's the easiest of the lot. The next up is the canna. Now you can see this has got big fleshy roots, and you can see there are shoots coming from it. Now, as the temperatures drop, we want to keep it alive, keep it happy, but to suppress its desire to grow. And the important thing is to keep it moist, not let it dry out too much. Just get a bag. I use old potting compost bags and pop it in. And this will keep the moisture, keep it dark. Now that can be put anywhere that is frost-free and not too warm. But of course, do remember to label it. Really important. And this is where dahlias come in. Because if you have a dahlia, like this one, which is Bishop of Llandaff, just cut it back a little bit more. So we can take that back like that, and like that. All this extra growth, because we don't need it, and it's not going to stay. That is ready to dry out, but we don't want it to dry out completely. So the best thing to do is leave it somewhere where the soil can start to dry, the top growth can dry off. So there's plenty of ventilation. Now, it's really important to label dahlias, because you think you'll remember what it is, but you won't. Not if you're anything remotely like me. Now, that can sit for a week, and in a week's time, I'll show you what the next stage of storing dahlias is. But here are some other things that you can do right now, this weekend. Although the changing colour of trees and their foliage is one of the glories of the season, it does bring with it a few problems for pond owners, because leaves in the water will sink, decompose and add nutrients, and that in turn will feed weed and algae next season. So clear them out regularly. It's one of those jobs it's better to do little and often. Good for a piece of quiet contemplation. If you're growing tender bulbs like Altonia or Euonymus, they need lifting or protecting because they'll only be hardy to a few degrees of frost. Dig them up and take them in under cover. Trim off any loose leaves and either pot them into a very free-draining compost and put them somewhere dry, like in the greenhouse, or simply let the bulbs dry out and store them in a cool place. If you have young salad plants growing, they do need some protection if they're to last through till next spring. And this is where cloches are very useful. Place cloches over the plants, but don't close the ends. Ventilation is just as important as protection. Right, that should protect them. Now, the leaves are starting to stream off the trees, but some trees and shrubs look fantastic with their bare silhouettes. And willows, or at least some of them, are right there amongst the best of them.
I suppose the way that most of us think about willows is in the spring as pussy willows adorned with these delightful fluffy yellow catkins. But the willow family is huge, it's enormous. There are hundreds of species scattered all over the northern hemisphere. And there are 19 or so that are native to the British Isles. And some of them the trees. This is the common willow. It's Salix cinerea. And the closer you get, the more you're aware of the magical life that's happening along these deeply fissured branches. There are all manner of soft mosses and beautiful lichens. And every so often, here and there along the branches, are these little colonies of the most exquisite, tiny toadstools. Absolutely magical. We can't all find a space for something this big, but the great thing about willow is that there are so many varieties and forms to choose from. Here in West Wales, Dave Clark has amassed a diverse collection of more than 300 different willows. Which one did you start with?
We started with some of the viminalis, some of the bigger ones, and a few of the basket willows. And the viminalis are the stronger growing ones. And it was used a lot, especially in parts of Wales, as a framework for the coracles. If you take a piece of willow and wrap it around your fist, if it doesn't break, then you can use it for weaving.
Yeah. So how long have people been making baskets then?
When they were doing Hadrian's Wall, they found a basket when they were excavating there.
So some of these willows may have been brought over by the Romans?
Yes, almost certainly they were. You've got willows that grow in the bushes, willows that grow in the trees. You've got willows which rabbits don't like.
Which are those?
Well, most of the purpureas you've got, because they're bitter, they have a high salicin content, which is where aspirin came from.
So the rabbits are going to leave it alone unless they've got a headache. But I want a willow that's going to be brilliant for wildlife. What would you recommend?
I think Hecker is the best one. It only produces a bush.
Yeah.
All the branches twist and go backwards and forwards on themselves. It attracts all the birds because nothing can get at them. It has nice, bright, shiny leaves right the way up until December.
You've sold it. One of the things about willows is how easy it is to make more, isn't it?
It is. And if you look at these little brown spots, that's where the roots will come from.
Right. So how many cuttings would you take from something like that?
Out of this one, I only take 2. The cuttings are about 10 inches, but the interesting thing is that if you planted this in the grass, I'd expect you to see between 18 inches and 2 foot of growth in the first year. If you took a rubbish bag outside and put it on the grass first, and went round it with a spade and pushed it into the grass, and then planted that in the middle, that would put out between 7 and 9 foot.
Right.
It is that much difference.
Just because of the competition from the grass?
Just because of the competition from the grass.
Wouldn't you just love this in your garden? This is Salix alba yelverton. And you achieve this wonderful glowing orange colour by cutting it hard back. Come March or the beginning of April, if you cut it down to the ground, up will come these lovely new shoots. This is just a year's growth. At first, that new growth is green, but as autumn changes to winter and temperatures begin to plummet, it manifests these beautiful orangey red stems, positively sizzling. In contrast to all those delightful willowy willows, you come across something like this. This is Salix magnifica, with these resplendent, thick, solidly textured leaves and these gorgeous dark red stems. Some willows are superbly sensual. If you touch the back of the leaves of this lovely Salix candida, they're soft and fluffy, covered in down, and so too are the stems, as soft as a deer's new antlers. And once these leaves have fallen, it reveals these beautiful stems, and these buds swell and become quite round. They're next year's catkins. And I suppose that's the thing about willows. It's not just what they are at the moment, but what they're going to become, and all those various stages that they all go through, and the anticipation of those lovely fluffy catkins next spring.
Willows are lovely and they grow fantastically well around here, but just one word of caution is because they grow so easily from cuttings, there is a temptation to put them in everywhere. And that's exactly what I did when we first came here to Longmeadow, especially down by the damp garden. And they go on growing. They become big trees, and after about 10 years, they're really quite difficult to move. So although they're easy to grow, they're a little bit more difficult to get rid of. So choose your site carefully. Now, if it was dry, I'd be planting broad beans now out into the vegetable garden. But the chances of it being dry here at Longmeadow in autumn are pretty remote. And at the moment, it's absolutely sodden. We've got heavy soil, it's a low-lying area, and we've had a lot of rain. And the result of that is it could be wet from now right through till next spring, which means that I wouldn't be able to get my broad beans out. But it doesn't mean to say that I can't sow broad beans. They grow very well in pots and then can be planted out as young plants as late as next March or April. Now, I've collected my own seed. These are the seeds of crimson-flowered broad beans. They're beautiful plants, these lovely cherry magenta-coloured flowers. And the beans are good to eat. And you just let the plant get mature and it looks as though it's died. And then you harvest the brown pods, and inside are the slightly dried up beans, which of course is what you want. Now you need to dry them a little bit more. And what I do is simply spread them out in a seed tray and leave them for 1 or 2 weeks. You know they're ready when if you press them with your fingernail, there's no give. Now these would stay ready to sow for at least a year. So perfectly good to leave these to sow direct into the ground next spring. But I want to get ahead. Use a potting compost rather than the seed mix, because these might well stay in the pot for, nearly 6 months. So they need a little bit of nutrition. And then just plant 1 seed per pot. Push it in like that. And of course, if you can sow them outside, prepare the soil, sow them about 9 inches apart, and then let them germinate. The problem with having them outside is mice love them. So in many ways, growing them in pots is a lot easier. Now these will be perfectly happy in the cold frame without any extra heat. The reason that cold frames work so well is that they can protect plants from wind, rain, and to a certain extent cold, because when you close them down, they're nice and insulated. But it is really important to open them up and let the plants harden off and be exposed to the air. Now, Nigel has been off the programme. He's been off games for a few weeks. And lots of you have written, emailed, tweeted, all wanting to know where is he and how is he. He's here and he's fine. He had a freak accident leaping for a ball and he damaged his spine rather badly, and that affected his legs. But through amazing treatment and recuperation, he's recovering very well indeed, but we're expecting him to return to complete fitness by next spring, which is when he will be back part of the garden again, won't it, Nige? Bye-bye. Come on, Nigel. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Well, we've reached November, and it does feel like the garden is slipping quietly away to the end of the year. But there are a few bright moments, both to be relished and also jobs to be done. And this week I shall be gathering up fallen leaves to make the perfect leaf mould. Rachel will be celebrating leaves at East Bergholt Place in Suffolk, where she glories in the beauty of the spindle.
And now we can't walk past this.
No, we
That
can't.
is so beautiful.
It's very special.
I'm coveting that one.
I know,
So.
And Carol visits RHS Rosemore, where she's looking at a host of hollies.
Of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. And the thing to remember is that a holly's for life, not just for Christmas.
I'll also be planting too, turning my copse into a full-blown woodland garden. There can't be a garden or a street or a patch of park in the country that isn't covered with fallen leaves at the moment. Now, there are two ways of looking at this. You can either say, oh, it's one of those terrible seasonal chores that has all got to be tidied up. Or you can say this is a harvest. Leaf mould dramatically improves your garden. Leaf mould is different to compost. Compost is very rich in nutrients and breaks down mainly by bacterial activity, whereas leaf mould is quite low in nutrients, but fantastic for improving the structure of the soil. And I use it mostly as part of my potting compost. For example, bulbs always do really well in leaf mould. Dry leaves break down much slower than wet ones. So actually gathering them wet is not a bad idea. Having raked a pile of leaves, you want a couple of boards. They make lifting leaves so much easier because you just hold them in your hand, pull them together, hey presto, you can pick up a whole load and then you can just plonk them into the bag. Now, there is one other really useful way of using leaves, which is to protect wildlife. If you've got a hedge and the leaves of the hedge are falling off, what I do is just scrape them back in along the base of the hedge, and that does a number of things. Obviously, it acts as a mulch for the hedge, which is good, but it also provides brilliant cover for insects, small mammals, reptiles, and if there are enough leaves, they may even hibernate. So a very good form of cover. You're making your garden a little bit tidier, but not too tidy to put off wildlife, which of course adds to the garden. The process by which a leaf like this can reach leaf mould like that, and this is the leftover leaf mould from last year. So this looked like this exactly 12 months ago. It's almost entirely fungal, just leaves and fungi, and it will happen. Now, we make a bay out of chicken wire, and chicken wire is absolutely ideal because it lets lots of air in. But if they're at all dry, when you've got a layer, water it and get them wet, because the fungi needs moisture in which to work. Now, this method is fine if you've got plenty of space, but if you're short on space and you've got some leaves you want to keep, there is another way of doing it. Gather up your leaves as normal and then put them into a polythene bag. Make sure they are thoroughly soaked and make some holes in the bag so any excess water can drain away. Don't seal the bag, but just fold it over. Then put it somewhere to one side where it can sit out of the way for at least 6 months and maybe up to a year. And at the end of that time, you'll have a bag of lovely leaf mould. A really good way of collecting leaves off grass is simply to mow them. Run the mower over the ground as though you were mowing the grass, and that will collect the leaves up. It has the other advantage of chopping them up.
It is often far too wet to mow at this time of year. Nevertheless, if you've got a solid brick or stone path, tip your leaves onto there and run the mower over them like that. Now, all this is very practical and necessary, but one mustn't forget that these leaves are beautiful at this time of year, especially when they're still on the trees. And Rachel has been to East Burgolt Place in Suffolk to admire the foliage, particularly of the spindle and other members of the Euonymus family.
Well, with so many of the plants here, really at their absolute peak, it's very easy to be distracted. But part of the reason for my visit is to meet a man who has a very special interest in a particular group of plants. Rupert Ely is the fourth generation of his family to garden here. His great-grandfather began to lay out these 20 acres at the turn of the last century. Rupert is an expert plantsman and serves on several of the Royal Horticultural Society's plant committees, and Euonymus are his passion. Rupert, you hold the National Collection of deciduous Euonymus. What is it about them that you like?
Well, I mean, this probably says it all, really. This is our native spindle, known as spindles because they've got hardwood and they were used for spindles in the old days for spinning. You only have to look at that, how wonderful pink fruits, masses and masses of them. The orange seeds beginning to show here. They sort of look at you like eyes, but also very good autumn leaf colour. Just a very, very good native plant.
I know you've got a very large collection here. How many different forms, different species and hybrids have you got?
We've got really about 100 different forms.
And now we can't walk past this.
No, we can't, indeed.
That is so beautiful. What's that?
Yeah, and this really brings another dimension to the spindles, or Euonymus. This is a form of Bungianus. Bungianus is from northern China, and really it's very graceful, as you can see. Wonderful, airy, open plant. These fantastic hanging, glowing pink leaves, really, yes. And not troublesome, you know, tough, hardy. They don't mind the cold or frost or anything like that.
Now, you say that they're very easy to grow, but what sort of conditions would you give them in an ideal world?
In an ideal world, I think sort of a little bit of dapple shade, which actually this has got at the moment, and sort of quite nice leafy soil. But I mean, just looking through that with the light, it's very special.
I'm coveting that one,
I know.
Now, this one is just showing off.
Well, I agree. It's another one we can't walk past. This is the trouble. We could be here for days, really.
I don't mind. I'm perfectly happy. Tell me about this one.
Well, this is a form of Elatus, which you see available in garden centres quite a lot. Very, very reliable autumn colour. This wonderful dark red. But a tidy grow as well, which it doesn't get more than about, at the most, 6 foot.
Presumably this would be a really good plant then for a smaller garden.
Very much so.
Now this is a bit different.
Yes. This is a Hamiltonianus form, Hamilton's koi boy, with the white popcorn-like fruits, yes. Really. A great contrast and different to what we've seen so far. And then, yes. Of course, behind it here, we have another completely contrasting plant. We have Euonymus oxyphilus.
Look at the size of these seed heads, and they're enormous.
Yeah, and very special. They're like sort of works of art if you look underneath at them.
Beautiful.
Broken into segments like marbles, and then they burst open and you get this wonderful orange seed looking at you.
What is your favourite plant for autumn colour?
Probably Ostrea virginiana.
I can see why you like it.
Well, I like it for a number of reasons. North American tree. I've known this tree my entire life. My great-grandfather would have planted about 1900 when the garden was first started. I, as a boy, used to walk past it frequently in my school holidays and things, and I shall always remember it in the autumn and in the spring when it has the sort of hornbeam-like flowers, and then the wonderful colour in the autumn and the lovely lacy layout of the branch.
Gorgeous, isn't it? I love that butty
yellow colour. It's an old friend, actually.
Do you think this autumn, because we had a pretty dreadful summer with all that rain, do you think this is going to be a good autumn for colour?
I think we're going to have a good autumn, actually, I have to say. And all of the autumns are different in the garden, but all are memorable. Yeah.
Now this is the copse, and it was coppiced last winter, which means that it was cut right to the ground. It's underplanted with all the normal British woodland coppice plants, bluebells, primroses, wood anemones, and they're lovely. But I want to add more garden plants, and the plants I'm going to put in here are all adapted to growing in the shade of woodland. The first plant I'm going to put in is Euphorbia amygloides varrobii. It's got wonderful sort of bright lime yellow inflorescences that go from April right through into summer. And it's a very robust plant that thrives in dry shade. Now this is a spreader. I'll put this down here because that's pretty shady and that can spread out, and I've got a few more which I'll make a group with. My second plant is another native, and this is an iris, Iris foetidissima. Now this is what you would buy in a garden centre or a nursery, but actually a friend has given me a clump which they divided, and it does show really the special thing about this plant, and those are the seed heads, and that's what is so magical about this iris. And I should be able to get half a dozen plants out of this. Okay, here goes. Be brave. Now, if I tease that out, these are the feeding roots, and these are what need to be underground, but the rhizome needs to be on the surface of the soil. If you are planting any of these shade-loving woodland plants, and of course by woodland, I don't mean to say you've got to have a wood, it could be in the shade of a wall or a fence or a building. All this applies just as easily to a garden in the middle of a city as it does in the middle of the countryside. And if you're planting any of these and you've got some leaf mould, now is the time to use it. Don't add compost, they don't need a lot of nutrition, but leaf mould is absolutely perfect. So that's the stuff to add. Now the third plant that I'm putting in today is a geranium. This is Geranium macrorhizum album. It's another one that thrives in dry shade and will spread and create carpets. A really good plant that is tough, adaptable, and wants to grow in these conditions. Now all this, everything we're planting now, is for next year. We could wait 6 months to see it at its best. And of course this applies to bulbs, I suppose, more than anything. November is the month of tulip planting. And if you haven't yet planted all your tulips, well, here's some inspiration.
I love tulips because they are such a joy at this time of the year. They can flower from really quite early on, beginning of March, right through to the end of May. You get these amazing shapes and form and textures and contrasts and subtleties, and the ability to mix and match and treat it as an annual or treat it as a permanent planting. And I just love them. The most important thing about planting tulips is plant them in numbers. Cram as many as you can get in, because if you dot them around, you won't get any impact whatsoever. If they're in a pot, put as many as you can. If they're in a bed, put them as many as you can. Don't skimp on them. In these two beds, we've got more sort of formal kind of planting in the sense that we've got the box beds, but we've actually planted in a more loose way by mixing the colours. We've got very beautiful couleur cardinal here with the purple carried up from the stem, up through the tulip, veining through the red, which is picked up fortuitously by this one, which is havran. And this is a good example how we could actually pair this combination of tulips elsewhere in the garden, or maybe in a pot. And it's a way of experimenting and gives us ideas of things to do in the future. These ones are actually planted quite shallow. Because they're annuals, we've got to remove them and get rid of them at the end of the season. So what we do in here is we actually lift whole blocks of soil, place them all out, and then put the soil back over, and it's about 4 inches. Elsewhere in the garden, where it's a more permanent planting, we plant them very, very deep. When it comes to the mixed borders, we know exactly the colour schemes we have, and then we'll add different varieties and leave them and let them die down, taking out the seed head to preserve the goodness in the bulb. This bed is a much more subtle form of planting. Because we've got the backdrop of the black barn so close, tried to use a very dark tulip. And then we've got some more subtle ones like the Angelique there, which is a good contrast with the dark. I found in the past, if I just plant dark tulips on their own, the bed looks flat. It needs another colour just to lift it. Have a go. As a first try, I would really recommend Ballerina. It is the most beautiful, reliable, lily flowered tulip, and it smells of tangerine, and it's just divine. You can use them on a bright palette, a soft palette. You can use them in so many different ways, and to me they're just incredible herald of things to come and full of joy.
Although I have already planted some tulips in pots, I'm not ready to plant tulips in the ground yet because most of them go into the jewel garden, and that needs clearing and tidying up before we can get the bulbs in. But there's no real pressure. November is the ideal month, but as long as you get your tulips in the ground by Christmas, they will come up and flower fine next spring. Now, I don't know if you know this plant. This is a tree dahlia. It's already been touched by frost, so very soon it's going to have to be cut down, lifted and brought in. But before I do that, I just want you to see how lovely it can be as a foliage plant. They do flower, but only in a really hot summer, and then the flowers are quite small in August and September. But I don't mind. I don't mind the fact that they're without flowers because they add something that no other plant does in the borders. And they just get better and better until the frost hits them. And you cut them down, bring them in and store them, and pull them out again and plant them after the last frost next year. Now, if you're not planting tulips and you're not growing tree dahlias, here are some other jobs you can be getting on with this weekend. At this time of year, brick and stone paths can become incredibly slippery. This is because of the algae that forms on them. Now, there are lots of products you can buy to get rid of this algae, but be careful to choose one that's not harmful to plants or animals, and then simply follow the instructions. As your rhubarb leaves finally die back, clear them away and take them to the compost heap. Weed around the crowns and then mulch as generously as you can, either with compost or well-rotted manure. But be careful not to cover the crowns themselves, because that may rot or burn them. However, the more generous you are with the mulch now, the better your harvest will be next spring. As we move through November, it's worth going through your borders to remove any dying or fallen leaves that are smothering plants. Because if they're left, they can stop the light and air getting in and cause the core of the plant to rot. So clear around each plant and remove the debris to the compost heap. I've got an email here from Lee Dawson in Johnson in Scotland, which says, last year I tried to store dahlias for the first time. However, out of 7, only 1 took, and the flowers have been terrible to say the least. Am I doing something wrong or missing a trick? Well, it's difficult to say about these things without seeing them, but if you store dahlias so that they dry up, the chances of them flowering next year or even growing at all are slim. And that's what you're looking to avoid when you're storing them. So if you remember, last week I lifted them and I've dried them out. And the idea is not to dry them out deeply or properly, but just get rid of the superficial moisture. So now that we've got these clean, slightly dried off tubers, the art of storing them is to keep them frost-free
but not dried up. I've got a crate here, which if I line it with newspaper, just to stop any protective layer falling through, and simply place the tubers either with a bit of soil around them or washed off. Doesn't really make any difference. In they go like that. And then just cover it over with old potting compost or vermiculite or even sand will do. And as long as the whole crate doesn't freeze, these will store perfectly well. Just pop that there. A little bit of water. Now those can go under there because this greenhouse is always kept frost-free but cool. Ideally the temperature will be between freezing, doesn't need to be much warmer than that, and say a maximum of about 10 degrees. And if they can be kept in the dark, so much the better. Check them about once a month, give them another water if it's getting very dry, and then next March I'll pull those out and we'll start thinking about provoking them into growth with a little bit of heat, and then we can take cuttings and start that lovely cycle again. But we're not going to get flowers from these till next summer. However, Carol has been to RHS Rosemoor in Devon, where she is enjoying their collection of plants which are at their prime right now.
Of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. This is Ilex aquifolium, our native holly. It's probably our most common evergreen tree. It's a magic tree. It's surrounded by all manner of myth and legend. Pagans believe that the year is ruled by two tree kings. In summer, it's the turn of the oak king. He holds sway. But as autumn changes into winter and the reign of the holly king begins. Gardeners love hollies for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's for their beautiful foliage. Sometimes it's for the gorgeous berries that festoon their branches in every kind of colour. And sometimes it's for their architectural forms. Holly's about so much more than a prickly evergreen with red berries. To look at the incredible and diverse range of hollies on offer, I've come to explore the National Collection at RHS Rosemoor in North Devon. Jonathan Hutchinson looks after the collection here and knows just what diverse characteristics hollies have to offer.
They're all very individual. There's a huge range within the genus.
A plethora of hollies.
Yes, that's it, yeah.
and as well as being different, I mean, you use them in all sorts of different ways too, don't
Yes,
you?
we do, yeah. They've got quite a range of uses within the garden, from the informal right down to the very formal.
I mean, you can use holly as a sort of ingredient in your native hedge, and you could use it just as a hedge itself.
Yes, yes.
But this is a most unusual way of using it.
Yes, I don't think it's something that that people have often seen, where you've got Ilex aquifolium, J.C. Van Tol, and Fuchsia sempervirens. The fact that one seems to creep its way up through another, it's like it produces a really nice tapestry. Occasionally you get the odd berry that's hiding in the foliage.
Hints of red.
In amongst the foliage.
Which you'd expect from a holly,
Yes,
wouldn't
that's
you?
it, yeah.
So this is another of those more than 100 cultivars of Ilex aquifolium.
Yes, this is Ilex aquifolium Handsworth New Silver. Variegated plants aren't always my favourites, but this one I do like because it's just on the edge and it really defines the green leaf. And then you've got that lovely purple stems and the fruits that are just starting to turn. It's lovely.
Isn't this a holly too?
This is also another holly. Yes, this is Ilex verticillata. It's a North American species. And not only doesn't it have prickles, it's also deciduous. So it's like a sort of a double whammy of pretending not to be anything like a holly that you would imagine it to be, really.
And the sort of holly that you could grow in any ordinary garden.
That's it, yeah, perfectly easy to grow, and a really good novel bit of cut stem for Christmas.
And the blackbirds will thank you too.
Yes, if you get there, if you try and get there before they do.
Tiny leaves and a really short habit of growth, and blackberries. Would you take this for a holly? But it is. It's Ilex crenata from Japan, and this one's called Ilex crenata convexa because each of these lovely little leaves is curved both that way and crossways, so it's almost like an inverted spoon. And it's been used quite a lot as a substitute for box when box blight is a problem. I think it's absolutely charming, and it's the sort of plant you can really imagine fitting into your garden. Most of us want a holly that's covered in red berries. Well, you really couldn't do better than this. This is Ilex aquifolium pyramidalis. It's been awarded the Award of Garden Merit by the RHS, so you know it's going to make a brilliant tree. And just look at it. Dark, glossy leaves and loaded with brilliant red berries. In most cases, you need both male and female trees to ensure a good set of berries on the female. But in this case, it does it itself. It's self-fertile, and almost invariably you get this beautiful set of luscious berries. Some hollies have giant leaves and some have tiny ones. Some are dwarf trees and some are enormous, great, majestic specimens. And the thing to remember is that a holly's for life, not just for Christmas.
If you've been building a bonfire over the last weeks and months, just bear in mind that hedgehogs are going into hibernation now. And if you've had a heap building up over the last few weeks and months, it's the perfect place for them to go and nest in. So just check it. And I'll see you here next week. Till then, bye-bye.